Morning, folks. So I started reading a book this morning. It's by Mark Wolynn, or Wolynn, Wollynn. He wrote a book called It Didn't Start With You. And it's a book that's all about like inherited trauma, inherited family trauma, basically. And it's really interesting. I feel like I'm sort of on a kick right now with this stuff because it's very similar. I've picked up this back book that's all about feeling the emotions. John Sarno, his thesis is basically back pain is caused by trapped emotions, and if you feel them, you can heal back pain. I'm still in the middle of Letting Go by David Hawkins, which is an amazing kind of spiritual practice type book. But again, it's the essential message is feel what you're really feeling, and because that way, when you actually feel it, you can let it go. And a lot of times it'll result in revelation or in discovering where that feeling is coming from. A lot of times when you start to feel what's in your body, it starts to just be able to become associated with the event that caused it or the period of life that caused it. Sometimes not, and it doesn't really matter if it does. It can be let go in the letting go process, whether or not you actually recall how the imprinting took place. But the point is, it's all about feeling. And this book, I'm sort of at the beginning of it. I mean, I only read the introduction and the very first, kind of the start of the first chapter, but it's essentially seems like it's on the same track. It's basically, he tells a story of like going and meditating for years and going and studying with all these gurus, and then eventually a couple of gurus tell him, go back home and make peace with your parents, and that's what he does. And from what I've heard from the description of the book, it's just kind of this very well defended, very well kind of articulated and argued perspective that basically says so much of our trauma is inherited, and not just from our parents. It's like lineage stuff. It's like all the way through, and it can be traced apparently in some scientific ways. I need to read the rest of the book to find out how, but it just feels like that message is coming through really, really loud and clear for me right now. And I think I've done a post on this in the past, but there's a way in which family stuff, family issues, and family dynamics can really kind of they can loom large when you're doing deep spiritual, reflective, self-examination work, because our families are where we were imprinted for the most part. A lot of our conditioning comes from our families. It comes from our parents and our family environment, siblings, very close people. And that's where we got our original habits of thought. And so as we start to dismantle that, it can sort of put us in antagonism with our family dynamics, or and then that can feel like, okay, well, now I'm in conflict with the actual people. And I think one of the things that I take from the introduction to this book is that this guy kind of left. He was having a physical ailment. One of his eyes he was losing his vision, and so he went on this quest. And sort of, he said he learned a lot, but it was when he got sent back home. 2 different gurus told him, go home and fix this with your parents. And it kind of tells me that I just think there's a healthy way of doing this work with family members. That's one thing. And just how important it is to really feel what's there in a family circumstance or a family set of circumstances, because one of the things that David Hawkins says, he talks about the difference between how emotions are generally processed if they're not, if we're not doing, if we don't sort of take a conscious approach, then what generally happens is two things: either suppression / repression, where the feeling is just pressed out of consciousness so we don't feel it, either unconsciously through repression or consciously through suppression, or expression is the other side of the duality coin, where we just express the emotion, generally to someone else. And what he says about expression is that expression doesn't actually truly take care of the emotion. The idea that expressing the emotion is going to clear it is false. He says basically what happens is you express enough of the emotion to kind of relieve the pressure, and then so that the remainder of that emotion can be repressed or suppressed. And right in the middle, between those two, is experiencing the emotion, actually truly feeling it, not allowing it to make us act out the emotion, not allowing us to force it underground and force it out of awareness, but actually sitting with it, just being in that space of holding it. And again, that's where the truth is. That's where it can tell us where it came from, or if it doesn't tell us that, it can tell us just what it is that we need to feel. And there's this connection with the body. And so, yeah, I mean, that's just, I just feel like that's so big. And I think, this idea of working with our families and being willing to open those doors with our family members, I just think is really important, because clearly so many of our issues and so much of our truth comes from that, comes from those early experiences and those people. And there's just such massive capacity for healing, massive potential for healing there. And the idea that we can understand that all of this is a lineage. We've been bequeathed so much of our experience and so much of our pain in some ways, so many of our limitations. Understanding that, not just like my parents did this to me or whatever, but like understanding the whole thing as a continuum, and realizing we're just the latest blip on the screen in a long, long line. That kind of lets us not, it takes a lot of for me anyway, it takes a lot of the blame out of it. I don't need to blame anybody anymore. Now I just see a whole process happening, and I see where I am in the process. I have a child now, so I'm not the latest blip in the process. And I think just taking that on feels important. And I'm getting the message because every book I pick up seems to be saying that. So that's where I am this morning, folks. I love you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being in my life. I very much hope to talk to you, see some of you very soon. Bye-bye.